Welcome to the Pulse Wave podcast, brought to you by Metronome, where we deliver mission-critical tech to harden our American land, seas, and skies, built for Earth, ready for orbit. As I said, welcome to the Pulse Wave, a brand new studio, a brand new season, if you really want to call it a season. We did a season last year. It was a lot of fun, and I got some good responses, so I decided, let's kick this off again. Let's give it a new look, and let's get new faces in here. So, 4th of July is upon us, Independence Day, one of my favorite holidays of the year by far. I just love the patriotism. I love the memories that it brings up. As a matter of fact, I posted on LinkedIn earlier today about memories I had of my father and my grandfather, who were both veterans, and some of the things we would do on the holidays, and, sort of beer on their breath and macaroni and hot dogs on their breath as well. But they would sing the songs that they used to hear when they were in the service, and I would bounce up and down on their knees and see the fireworks shooting off, and the patriotism and the camaraderie and the safety it had me feel just has really got me very patriotic this week, and I'm excited for 4th of July. So we've got a great show today. I've got a couple folks on. I've got Tommy Weinert is coming on, the president of Mount Indy. We've also got Rob Murtha, the CEO and founder of Adjective. We're going to be talking about GovTech, of course, because we're all part of that industry. And we're going to be talking what a lot of folks have on their mind right now is AI and how it's affecting their companies, how it's affecting the industry. And so I want to ask all of you something. When did we start treating artificial intelligence like it's contagious? Like it's a virus we need to isolate, suppress, and vaccinate the country against? The way some of these out-of-touch senators are acting, you'd think ChatGPT bit their dog and started speaking Mandarin. Here's the truth. AI is not the disease, it's the panacea. This is the tool that can cure our bureaucratic rot, expose inefficiencies, and actually improve human performance. It's not a threat to civilization. It's a threat to lazy thinking, red tape, and dumb decisions. And that's why they're scared. But instead of treating it like the next generation of software, which it is, they're treating it like it escaped from a level 4 biolab in Wuhan. Seriously, now they want 50 states writing 50 different AI laws? What are we doing? It's like we're building the next version of the DMV digitally. I don't need a deep fake of Joe Biden to tell me that this is a bad idea. Let's be clear. AI is just code. It's software. It's math, it's logic, and it's data. But yeah, of course, it's powerful. Just like a gun, a car, or even a smartphone. It can be misused. But we're not banning cars because people drove drunk. We're not banning calculators because some kid cheated on his math test. And we didn't ban the internet just because people posted cat videos, conspiracy theories. It's not the tool, it's the fool that uses it. And right now, the fools are trying to regulate this thing are the same ones who need interns to unmute their Zoom calls. They still think that the cloud is weather-related. What this country needs is one clear federal strategy that keeps us innovated, keeps us safe, and keeps us competitive. Not a patchwork of laws written by 70-year-olds who just discovered autofill. You think China's arguing about whether AI should be regulated by county zoning boards? No. They're embedding it into every part of their society like it's a cheat code. Meanwhile, we're over here panicking because an algorithm wrote a poem that's hurting somebody's feelings. Here's what we do. We keep AI in the federal lane. We stop pretending that it's a digital pandemic. We train people to use it, not to fear it. And we lead the world, we don't limp behind. AI is not our enemy, it's our edge. But if we keep handling the steering wheel to the same folks who still carry flip phones just in case, we're going to lose the edge real quick. So no, I don't support state-level bans. I don't support fear-based regulation. I support building, leading, and winning. AI isn't the apocalypse, it's the opportunity. And the only disease here is the stupidity trying to stop it or slow it down. So welcome to the show here. As I mentioned, we've got Rob Murtha and Tommy Weinert. Tommy Weinert is the founder of Mount Indy, a GovCon recruiting firm, and a former blockbuster video clerk turned top defense talent strategist. Woo! Rob Murtha, Army vet and CEO of Adjective. He helps defense organizations grow using AI strategy. Welcome to the show, guys. They also happen to be very good friends of mine. So,
What's up?
oh man,
Yo.
there's so much stuff up.
Dude, I had no idea you were coming in so hot. That was a great monologue.
Seriously.
Come
Got
on now.
goosebumps.
Independence Day. It's independent and I can say whatever I want. So we're going to try something new here, right? Like, I've never done this. I'm going to share my screen.
Oh, cool.
And yeah,
It's like workshop podcasting.
I'm telling you. Here we go. There we go. Share. All right. So, as I mentioned earlier, right, you see this week that there's this debate now between the House and the Senate. The House sent the big, beautiful bill over to the Senate, and it had in it a 10-year moratorium on states enacting their own regulations on AI. It didn't say that federal was not going to hand regulations down. So it got to the Senate, and the Senate, 99-1, voted it down, and they took out those regulations. And I want to say they tied it to, here, we can talk about it a little bit here. But I'm curious, before we go this here, Rob, are you on the side of the House who does not want 50 different legislations, or are you on the side of the Senate who essentially wants it federally mandated?
I'm on the side of less control, more open AI. So I think that's on the side of the House, right?
Yes.
And I have a bunch of reasons for that. Ironically enough, I'm working on a paper right now that's titled "America Sucks at Cronyism When Corruption Meets Incompetence." I think any type of America's built on, whether we like it or not, it's built on open systems. It's built on, if you create something that consumers want and drive demand, it's going to kind of evolve systems. Anytime we try to control, manage that, the level of friction and cronyism really hinders whatever we're trying to achieve, right? And it's also a call to action to our adversaries to geopolitically or, fifth gen warfare style get involved and make that system not perform well. And, it's funny because the title of this piece, America Sucks at Cronyism, focuses on like how bad we are at trying to pull and control levers. When there's American cronyism, we have a railway that doesn't get complete. If a railway is supposed to get completed in 5 years at a $3 billion budget, our railway ends up getting completed in 15 years at a $15 billion budget, and it doesn't turn on, consistently throughout the day. Adversarial countries that are completely vertically integrated, when they have cronyism, they build train stations in like 3 weeks. So we just can't compete at cronyism, right? I believe in an open system. I believe in the free market really governing and forcing builders and creators to make things that people need and want. And if there are any safety issues, that will be realized in the form of value, right? People won't adopt things because it'll hurt them, etc. I understand there's a level of compliance, but yeah.
So that makes sense. And when you talk about cronyism, one of the arguments against having it at the states is that if you've got quote unquote 50 different laws, the companies that are going to be most able to navigate that are going to be the large companies with all the resources and the money, and those folks are probably also in some type of cronyism. So it sort of lines up. Tom, I'm curious where you're at here.
I mean, I think I'm similar, right? The big takeaway for me is like if these systems are acquired the same way the government has, or the government's been acquiring defense technology for the last 20 years, by the time the acquisitions go through, the capabilities are going to be far beyond what they thought they were originally acquiring. So, I think in general, I've been saying this, I don't know if it's true or not, but I think the biggest roadblock to like really getting AI systems in place, especially for companies, is just the security component to it and training. And I was talking to DCSA about this 2 days ago, and literally, just how users use it, and, the insider threat component to AI, which I do think is a real thing. But I don't think it should be throttled, and I think if it's acquired the same way we acquire everything else, it's going to be it's not going to be as effective as it can be, because that cycle takes way too long. And the pace that it's changing, it changes every single day. I mean, 2 years ago, it was like, what's AI? And now the majority of people I know can't get through their day without it using some sort of LLM. So, things are changing very, very quickly, and we need to have the capability to acquire it at that same pace and make sure.
I agree. What's interesting is that they take AI, and as I thought about it a little bit, like, what are they assuming that AI is? And it's not, AI is essentially code, right? But they're talking about deepfakes. They're talking about misinformation. There's a lot in there that they're talking about child safety when you talk about social media. So there's a lot in that bucket of AI. But when you throw a bunch in a bucket, that's when I think the red tape and the regulation goes overboard. So talking a little more about AI, we're all basically on the same page. And I think what we all want is what's best is, yes, we need safety, but at the same time, we've got to be able to move forward fast. So I'm curious, Tom, at Mount Indy, I'm just curious how you guys are using AI in your day-to-day to help, the company or your customers.
Yeah. So I was talking yesterday. I don't know how I got as much done before AI, right? Like, it's been basically me personally, any single time that I'm doing a repetitive task, I take time to think, look, how can it be automated? How can I use AI to enhance this? But more specifically in recruiting, since this is a real hot topic in the candidate community, just about people thinking they're being rejected by an AI, which I want to say, right now is not the case for anyone. But we use it for assessment. We use it to guide calls. We build out, GPTs specifically for the company that really help us see things that ordinarily we're not seeing in resumes, in job requirements, things of that nature. We look for patterns. So, for example, if we've not to give away secret sauce, right? But we've had some great success recently on one of our programs, and the first thing I did is I said, look, let me put the successful candidates' information into GPT, find the correlations in there. Why did they get hired versus the other 50 that we didn't, get hired? And then that really spit out what we should be looking for future candidates and the patterns that emerge. So pattern recognition is an incredible way that we use it. But even things like, how do we write the most effective messaging based upon best practices and subject line conversion and open rates and click-through rates? And, we don't base that off recruiting data. We base that off of marketing data and email marketing data. And we look at these companies that are sending out millions of emails a month and seeing what they're doing to increase their conversion. And we mirror that. So AI helps us do that. Proposal writing, evaluations. There's other things I won't say that we use it for, but we use it all the time. And, I think we're still at the tip of the iceberg on how we're using it. We've also, one last thing I'll say is we've got our recruiting system, which is great, but it doesn't have great reporting and it doesn't have great dashboards. And it does have an open API. I'm not a software developer. I have no idea what I'm doing. But, in a week's time, I was able to pull all the information out of the API, create these dashboards, and code it. Literally write thousands of lines of code to get this dashboard up and running. So I'm super stoked on the future and what it's going to mean for our company.
Was it a GPT dashboard you built through?
I built it through GPT, yeah, but then I used it in Looker Studio is the dashboard, and then the code is written in Google Apps Script, which is all free stuff.
It's incredible. I remember it was about 4 or 5 months ago, and I was trying to write some 3D code for something that I was building. And the first time I saw Python code written on the screen that I did, I'll never forget that. It was pretty incredible. So, yeah. Hey, Rob, you're more technical than Tom and I, and I'm curious, Rob has essentially bored a hole in his brain and stuffed his own Neuralink in at this point. He hasn't left that room in 3 weeks. So I'm curious, man,
not a lie.
Just a little bit, tell us about some maybe personal projects and how they are affecting your adjective when it comes to AI and what we're talking about here.
Yeah, no, this is a great prompt. And just to kind of piggyback on what Tom was saying, I think what AI does is it like elevates everybody a little bit in different categories, right? It like kind of brings us all together, and it's like the master facilitator of things. So let's say I was like a developer light before generative AI really became commercialized and more dependable. Like I was a solution architect. I understood how systems were put together. I've written full stack products, but I've never done like deep tech, low level coding that you could like deploy to like, critical infrastructure or something that could ride on bare metal. Well, there's been a spectrum of things I've done to create more efficiencies for Adjective and the people we work with. I create little tooling here to kind of maintain focus via these fun little Google extensions I've been writing and like deploying to the Google store, which has taught me so much more than just like the coding side of it, because Google has to accept the risk of whatever product you're putting in there, and you have to justify how you're using like users' data and stuff. It's a really cool just kind of cycle to learn about products, business, security, all of the things. But I've also written like literally like generational code that doesn't exist in the way that we maintain infrastructure today. So there's a ton of big names like, Platform One, Kessel Run, DHS, USCIS has done a ton of like digital transformation and innovative stuff when it comes to infrastructure. I've literally started to write interesting applications in Rust, which is like a super low level coding language that like is truly generational. It can do things that we don't have available, at these programs today. And it's like, imagine if every engineer was thinking that way. How can we evolve these systems and just go deeper and deeper into the stack? Because now we have this beautiful artificial intelligence co-pilot partner to keep us honest. So I think like going back to your original question, sure, there's like tons of efficiency gains. There's tons of proprietary products that I, in a day spin out for a partner or something. But ultimately, it's just leveling everybody up. And it's like the master facilitator for all of us. For people that might not have been great at communicating to people and thinking of creating creative perspectives, it can like coach them on like how to position a product better, or position their really cool tech. For non-engineers, non-technologists, it can explain how APIs are kind of constructed, why they're constructed that way. So I think it's just closing all the gaps that we've all had because we've gravitated towards different areas of value creation. And that's why I love it so much.
I love that. Yeah, this era that we're in right now, and not just when you're talking about AI across, across our personal and professional lives, but our industry in general, obviously is taking a huge turn towards a new way of procuring. Obviously, you can't swing a dead cat now without talking about CSOs and SIBRs and OTAs, which is great. We've been zeroing in on that for the last 5 or 6 years, so it's nice to see that coming to fruition. But the fact that that's coming with AI and the ability to, as you guys are talking about, harnessing that information quicker, bidding more thoroughly, reviewing things better. It's such a crazy time when you think back when we got into the industry, 15 or 20 years ago, where we were at. So that got to me thinking about this for a little bit. Last night in my head, I was thinking, where has this industry come from, or where have we come, right? And where we're at now. So using my head as well as ChatGPT, I was thinking when I first started the industry, it was in the early 2000s. It was post 9/11, right? They could not spend money fast enough. I can remember folks would put in the notice that they were going to leave, and they would tell us they were going to make $15,000 more. And the company was able to match those offers without blinking when we go to HR. It was sort of incredible. That was an interesting time, obviously. And then it moved into the Iran and Iraq wars and the services explosions, all the IDIQs and Macs but really proliferating.
Iraq and Afghanistan. Don't foreshadow Iran.
I was thinking about it back then. And then there was concern over cost growth, right? 2010, 2011, I'm sure you guys remember this nasty word, sequestration. We started Metronome, and a few months later, they just started contracting, and they started hiring our employees and pulling them in and cutting back. And then what came out of that?
Hey, Virgil, can I jump in for the sequestration era? I was actually deployed to Afghanistan in 2012, and I remember all the contractors that were forward deployed that kind of worked alongside of us and stuff. They were all like, "Oh, we're isolated from sequestration because it was like combat required or something." So there was this really weird, interesting wrinkle that people don't look at, but sequestration actually drove a lot of like DoD contractors to want to take overseas positions because it was like mission required thing that was protected. Fascinating stuff.
Let me ask you a question about that too. So, but oftentimes the contractors were making triple what you were making.
Dude,
so
I did. Tom, I did the math. I made $325 an hour, I think, because it was 12 to 16-hour days, 7 days on, and there were contractors out there that were pulling in $350K to watch, dots on a screen turn red, yellow, and green, and it was wild. I mean, it was an impressive era, but you're totally right. Do you have any funny memories from that time frame?
My neighbor was at the time it was called Spaywar, now it's Navwar. He was a Spaywar employee, and he would come back from overseas and just complain about the contractors, like, can't believe these guys are making blah blah blah. But I mean, I did post something about this, but that time was really interesting because that's when we were doing a lot of human intelligence recruiting. So we were at the time it was the 97 Echo course, now it's the 35 Mike course, I think.
Yes.
But it was the HUMIT training in Fort Huachuca, and we would talk to, I was in my 30s. I was probably 30 and just started in defense, and I would talk to these kids that got back from running sources over there, and it was like heartbreaking, to hear their stories. It was really like empowering because a lot of these kids joined after 9/11, and that made them join. But a lot of them were, suffering from PTSD and having trouble finding jobs, things of that nature. But that was a pivotal moment for me into really kind of understanding like the dedication that, the warfighter has, which was, having no experience, not serving, and then speaking to a population that was like, I served because of this. That's
powerful.
Yeah, it was really powerful.
Real quick, I just want to pull on this thread for a second because I was sort of one of those kids. I don't know if I had all those attributes, but I definitely was one of those kids. I was at 35 November, so that's the SIGINT flavor. Yeah. Spent some time doing interesting tactical courses over at Huachuca. But one of the interesting things about that era too, which I found kind of influenced me to become an entrepreneur, and I did write a little blog on this, but it's fascinating, was that conflict was so interesting because we actually brought R&D to the fight. And that's like an entire podcast on its own, which is so interesting, where we did some iterations like on the battlefield. And it really kind of taught me about entrepreneurship. And regardless of what I bought, regardless of what I was getting paid, I looked at the people around me and I noticed opportunity. I was like, there's money to be made out here, whether that's good or bad. It was just like a fundamental perspective as a human. But also there was a mission. There was something we had to take our capability and treat it like some type of product or utility that somebody else is consuming. And for our particular mission, a wide variety of operators in Afghanistan could leverage what we were producing. And it was fascinating. It really taught me how to create something that's useful and objectively valuable. And we had competitors that offered similar types of capabilities, so like they could get the accolades or the respect, and we couldn't if we didn't kind of build a good product and maintain and service that product right. So that's one of the most exciting things. And ironically, as somebody who was making kind of less than the contractors out there, I looked at them and I was like, at least there's an opportunity outside the military someday when I choose to make that jump. It was fascinating, but I gained a lot of respect for business overseas, which is something so weird to say.
Very pragmatic view, and man, if everybody could have had that view over there, because I too spoke to a lot of contractors, folks that were deployed over there, and there was certainly some friction at that time. And then, which led us to LPTA, and we don't need to go on about that. That was we suffered for that for many years, right? And then quietly, DIU pops up around 2016, and they start reading into the FAR and really realizing how can we procure quicker and get things into the warfighter's hands faster. And then we saw some early signs of change around 2020 or so. We all started hearing about OTAs and consortiums. It still felt very foreign, at least to myself, but folks that were in that orbit out in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, they were starting to take advantage of that. When you talk about Palantir and Shield AI and Connor Lucky back then, they were early entrants into that. Super interesting stuff. Then you get into obviously COVID-19, you get into the relaxation of being able to work from home, you get into less positions maybe being secret, top secret. And then we find ourselves where OTAs are increasing, cybers are increasing, and today where defense tech is cool. Defense has merged with Silicon Valley, which whatever Silicon Valley really nowadays is more of like a thing as opposed to a place. Silicon Valley is, technology, pushing it fast and solving problems and having a lot of smart people at the table. To me, it's one of the most exciting time. It's the most exciting time ever that I've ever been in this industry. The industry is mixed with interesting people, young, old, tall, short, women, men, different colors, different ages. It's really exciting. We've got the ability to take advantage of the technology. So Rob and I were at Soft Week a few months back, and we stood in line for about 30 minutes, and there was probably 100 different companies in line who have never done any work with the Army, or most of them with the Army. And there was even a father and a daughter there with a product. There was cousins there with a product. People who have never done business with the United States were standing in line to be able now, because of these alternative pathways of procurement, to be able to show their products. And that was really exciting, and that was motivating to me, because they're putting their money where their mouth is. It's not just conjecture. They're actually doing this. So I'm curious how you guys feel about where we're at now in the industry and your level of excitement or hesitation, Tom.
Yeah, so, first of all, not every company can be Anduril, right? Like they did things completely different. And I intentionally pronounced it the right way. I've been calling it Anduril. I think it's Anduril it's from the Lord of the Rings, is what I've learned recently. But they did things totally differently, right? So in defense, we've been used to this private equity behavior where they buy platform companies, they acquire other companies, they put them under one name, they sell 5 years, rinse and repeat, right? They're buying butts and seats contractors. Anduril, I think, like, the last valuation I checked, they're $14 billion, but they're more than that now, which puts them on the list of like the top 10 defense contractors in terms of valuation, and they were formed in 2017. But they did things totally differently. Instead of saying we're going to wait for the acquisition process, they said we're going to build the best systems possible and then sell those back into the government. And that's exactly what they did. And so they're, I don't know about their contracting mechanisms or how they get money. I know a lot of it is private investment and venture capital, but they are not slinging proposals over, normal RFPs, waiting for acquisitions, then building products. So they did it totally differently, and kind of, in my opinion, through the whole acquisition process, upside down. Now, can that be repeated at that scale? I have no idea. But the point of venture capital and the Silicon Valley and the tech bros coming into the industry, and I have a lot of conversations with these folks, is, it's not that easy. This is a difficult space to be in. And, rapid growth like that is absolute. I wouldn't even call it a unicorn. Like, it's never been done before. I've never seen anything like that. So I do think that there's a lot of people entering the space from a financial standpoint, which is fine because we need brighter minds, in the space. But this is a long haul, and it takes a long time to get traction in the space unless you have billions of dollars behind you. So, I'm happy to see all the new excitement in the industry. But as an old stalwart, I'm also like, I've been here since day one. You know what I mean? Like, I know how it gets done. But so I'm a little hesitant because there's a lot of flash in the industry right now, and I don't know how sustainable it is, especially since the equity model traditionally in our space is acquiring companies that are services based and then selling them off in 5 years, versus investing millions of dollars into a company, billions of dollars into a company, not worrying about revenue, not worrying about profitability, and building for future profitability, which is essentially what Anduril did. So it's going to be interesting to see if this sustains with all this venture capital and if the excitement in the industry sustains.
I'm with you. Not everybody can be a whale. I agree. And it takes money to make money. A risk isn't just quitting your job. A lot of times it takes putting money out, or like you said, getting investment. And, Rob, I'm interested, your take here when you talk about where the industry is now and a lot of new players coming in. When you talk about, maybe that they don't have to be an Andrew, but when you talked about the stages of a SIB or an OTA, right? First, they see if your tech really makes sense, and then they see if it really works, and then they say, all right, well, I want a lot of this. I know that was a very high level. Our industry is very complicated. There's the FAR, there's the DCAA, and that's always going to exist. So I agree with your trepidation right now as well. Rob, how do you feel about where we're at?
Well, I think it's interesting, just having been kind of on the side of the government at Kessel Run as a GS and stuff, and then coming out to industry and doing growth for a while, and being pretty successful, like the kind of curve of non-traditional services companies that were able to sell themselves differently and get access to a bunch of these like OT sole sourceable contracts without like actual products, but like a different way of thinking. The industry is moving really quickly, and one thing that hasn't changed though, the one risk I think that whether we kind of have almost no FAR or governance for the way we cut contracts, or we do, is the fact that it all kind of falls on the government leader. And that's the most important thing we have right now, is like the talent and the systems that talent use to make determinations, because just because you made something flexible doesn't mean you're going to buy something better, right? I mean, it's arguably more exploitable, more crony, especially in the way that I described it earlier, where our version of cronyism isn't like we get a train station in 3 weeks. We have like someone gets money, it's a carve out, it's like this weird backdoor deal. A lot of them, and going back to what Tom said about that if you have money, it's easier to break into the space and have success, because it goes two ways, right? It's like you can build things that are interesting and opinionated that people can just purchase to solve a problem. You don't have to wait for their over-engineered kind of like decentralized requirements that end up being so confusing and weird and lame, honestly. And you also can just like straight up kind of like buy access to people. And it's that simple, right? And like any kind of bureaucratic organization, access is so powerful because pilots sell way better than words. And building things that actually work and people can use and adopt are extremely powerful as well. And I think looking at two of the big companies that have done this exceptionally well over the years, Palantir and Anduril, they're the first two that always come up in every conversation. And then there's a bunch of other tiers below them. Palantir's been around since '03. People don't realize that. I always joke around and say, as an operator, sure, there were like really kind of interesting R&D lab systems that I used overseas, but what did exist was Palantir Foundry and Microsoft products since like the early, counterinsurgency era. And then Anduril, people don't realize this, but they took like an incredible, futurist leadership team and went and purchased a ton of real companies that had legitimate hardware products that were complex, sophisticated, but they didn't have the storytelling, they didn't have the branding, they didn't have the inspiration behind them, and they built like just a spectacular portfolio and wrapped operations around them. And then overnight they became like way more compelling, way stickier, and that's really cool. So that being said, those two companies had two unique pathways to the government. And I think whether their SIBRs existed or any of these OTAs were created, they still were going to find their way to contracts and government money. They're just objectively kind of valuable and time to market for Palantir. They were there before other people were really focusing on data architecture, data fabrics, warehousing, all this stuff. And so, I think it's a really it's a really challenging thing for new companies to take advantage of, and for people that want to start working with the government, because it isn't that simple. You can't look at, like Tommy was saying, like the pathway that Palantir took or the pathway that Anduril took, because it was like the timing was incredible. The way they attacked it was really interesting. The momentum they have now to like build moats and isolate other people that will never compete in those categories is really kind of fascinating and also kind of a risk. I think we're at a weird time, but like going back to where, like what I started with, like, we need a serious way to objectively measure whether things are going to like make us more capable against an adversary or not. Because whether it's a flexible contract, whether it's a really cool branded product, doesn't matter. Like it has to work in this like super constrained, unforgiving environment. And Ukraine was a great kind of example of this type of environment. But we need to find a way to measure our investments still. And that's something that hasn't been addressed. And I honestly think, quietly, I think AI can be the objectivity that we haven't had. I think every single proposal / acquisition determination should have some type of model and like some interesting logic underneath it, some retrieval augmented generation data set, whatever. Make a determination about the outcome of that acquisition, even if that's not what is selected, to kind of enforce the cronyism that can occur and to risk manage the subjective bias that people have. And so and it should become, I think transparency will make our world so much more legitimate and create more products and capabilities than we've ever imagined. So just to reiterate that, I think AI should make an acquisition determination. We have a value, like this company with this capability was scored at 92.5%. And then we should have the team of acquisitions, SMEs, and all the people involved used for R&D assessments. They should build their determination, and they should be walled off from each other. And everyone should see AI selected this thing, super intelligence, with access to more semantic theory than anyone or any group of people, gave it a 92, or gave this thing a 92, and this group gave it a 45, right? And it wasn't selected. Even if they end up not going with the AI's kind of determination, we should all see that transparency so we can intercept risk and intercept cronyism at scale.
Let me say one thing. Sorry. So to that too, what we're saying is, even if you have the best stuff, even if you're still going into a contracting shop that has their way of buying, so that's another thing that I think we really have to deal with in our space is, to your point, how are we evaluating? Because contracting officer, even in the same agencies, are completely different from each other. And there is, when people say this is how the government buys, it's like, well, not really. Like every single organization buys differently. And so that's a great point.
And listen, they're always listening. They have their ears around. Who knows? It could be a nuanced thing they heard in the lunchroom that makes them go from 55 to 45 in their review of a company that they heard something about. I mean, who knows, right? It's completely, sure, there's objectivity because they're looking at it, but it's completely subjective. So it's interesting, right? We're talking about AI, then we talk about procurement, and both of them are opportunities and opening them up, but we're concerned about both because humans suck, right? Mm-hmm. So moving on to the next thing I want to discuss on the same lines of humans sucking. So there was a story this week that scared the living shit out of me. And here it is. So North Korea orchestrated a sophisticated scheme where operatives posed as remote IT workers to infiltrate over 100 U.S. companies, including defense contractors. Using stolen American identities and AI-enhanced tools, they were disguising their voices as Americans, by the way. These agents secured employment, sensitive data, but what they were really doing, obviously they're espionage, but they were sending all the money back to the North Korean state to use to buy stuff to terrorize the rest of the earth. So I'm curious. So
they were fundraising through working. I mean, that is ridiculous.
Crazy, right? So for somebody who, listen, we're all essentially, at the end of the day, you need people to do the stuff that we do, right? And that's what's great about what we're in, because it's services and we get to relate and work together. So Tom, what do you think about when you hear this story for somebody who's recruiting for many companies in this space? Yeah,
so I could say specifically the highest amount of credible threats from an insider threat, espionage arena comes from resume submissions, the highest. And, so that is the DCSA fields the most credible threats based upon resume submissions, which would back this up. I think recruiters, look, the clear candidate market is so competitive, and we're desperate to find people, so our guards are down at sometimes. But I do think that, not to sound like, a nerd, but like security is the responsibility of every single person in the company, especially the recruiting team. And this tracks with data that I've recently learned. I mean, this is how people are trying to get in. It's resumes, interviews, getting jobs. So this totally tracks. But look, the AI and people thing is scary. It's been proven that AI can get you through a coding interview with zero experience. We have to be a lot better about the way that we screen. we have to make sure we're getting eyes on people before we hire them, doing thorough vetting. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see if any of these North Koreans, I mean, they were working uncleared roles, or I don't get it, because they didn't have security clearances. So you kind of think that the security clearance vetting like filters out all the threats, but it doesn't seem like it does. And I can actually speak to specific examples, I won't, where people have done gnarly shit that had security clearances. But yeah.
I mean, look here, right? They stole the identities of over 80
yeah.
American social security numbers. They built convincing LinkedIn and GitHub profiles.
Yeah.
They used face swap and voice changing.
Yeah.
And they had physical laptop farms in the United States that they had, VPN through. So it looked like they were actually remotely working from the United States.
Yeah. I mean, it speaks to the vetting process, right? But this is the shit that's going to turn our industry back to return to office. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. The fact that the government was there and they haven't forced contractors back yet, quite frankly, I'm stunned. Rob, what's your take here? You know, someone who is really close to the fight and looking at Intel cables.
Dude, I mean, honestly, we do it to ourselves, right? And like, just to piggyback again off of what Tom was just saying, like, this is what's going to get everyone kind of pulled back to the office. It's like, or we can just think about this problem, decompose it, and creatively build products that solve it or mitigate the risk effectively, right? But we can't do that because we have all of this weird academic cronyism where cybersecurity is so theoretical and security is so theoretical, and we have competing lobbies that are going to make it hard to screen people because of privacy. And I'm not saying some of these things aren't legitimate. They're hard problems, but you can solve these. Like, these are solvable problems either with like a more technically trained recruiting team, a more interested and inquisitive recruiting team. I mean, I'm not going to, explain the TTPs here, but I think I joked with both of you about like some really cool kind of resume exploits and stuff. It's crazy, right? What people can do with something as simple because the target is of a certain background, right? Recruiters aren't super technical. They're not thinking of all these social engineering aspects and threats and components. So, we do it to ourselves, right? And at the end of the day, everyone needs to get better at what they do, and we can start to pay down this risk at scale. I've heard some embarrassing stories by really capable folks that have let, fake people get employed by companies that were waiting to get on contract, like ridiculous stuff, right? And I've also heard, there's so much irony to that. I mean, that's another whole podcast. And then I also have been in situations where leaders kind of accrue this risk on behalf of their organization. I've worked with people where a leader's like, oh, they don't need CAC cards or something. And it's like, what do you mean? That's the only mechanism for a background check in our world. They're a random, sure, you vetted their company, but they're all 1099s working under the company. They all want access to CUI information, and none of them have a CAC card. I don't feel comfortable as someone who's legit in this organization. You know what I'm saying? And so we do it to ourselves, man. And like, everyone's so worried about optics and perception and reputation and who they are and like vibe. And at the end of the day, you just make our system hurt. You trade your kind of second for feel good vibe for like serious risk for an organization, a mission, and our ability to stay competitive on the global stage. It's gross.
Let me add to that too. So I also think that our guard is really low because when we get phishing scams, when we get these scams, it's so obvious it's a scam. And like, so someone highly trained, I could see them getting through, but the recruiter in me also says, what the hell was the program manager doing? Like, what was their daily workload manager doing, not realizing that this staff wasn't legit? But I mean, anyway, I mean,
Hey, Tom, real quick on that. It's because of self-awareness, right? Like I do the same thing. I'm not good at a lot of things, but like I am kind of self-aware. That's like one of my vibes. It's like, hey, like I know when I sound cringe, I know what I'm saying like isn't valuable for this system or something. Other people like have different strengths, and self-awareness might not be their strength. Like they might just be thinking, oh, I can't wait to get on World of Warcraft and like make my mage more like gangster or whatever. And they're not thinking, they're accelerating through this interaction that's like the kind of gate that you intercept this risk at. And they're just like, oh, I want to get this cool piece of gear for WoW. And it's like, that's the reality. There's a lot of apathy in our world, and people don't take every step in the sequence as seriously as some other people do. They might be better at some things, but like it's a spectrum.
Totally. I think it would be really interesting. I don't know if the article says it, but how did they get caught? You know what I mean? Like, what were the signs? Like, that's great training material right there.
It's true. Like, yeah, it's great.
I don't remember, but they were. It was a long sting from the FBI. I know that was involved. There was also a CCP sting that just happened. They arrested 2 folks that were doing espionage, one in Texas and one in Oregon. Another interesting case.
Dude, we should open source cyber bounties and let people. I'm telling you, this is something like counterintelligence bounties. I was at a cafe 2 years ago, and I overheard a conversation from like a local service member talking to a student, and the student had an accent or whatever, probably international, whatever. We have a huge like international student body here in Savannah, which is wonderful. But there's also, when you're in the DoD or DHS world, like implications there. Like I would have loved to have created a report, even if it was nothing, to just be like, hey, there was this interesting thing that happened here. Somebody take a look at it. And like, I think, but it would have to be monetarily incentivized, right? We only have so much time in the day. I have to go build a product for Metronome or something. Like, we have things to do. I can't just like create cool, feel good, reports on behalf of people. But that's how you win. You don't have this bureaucratic, counter intel shop that like all theorize things. Like you need to like find decentralized way to achieve outputs that you might not have a ton of control over. Like that's an interesting kind of new way of thinking, an innovative way to do kind of collective intelligence.
Yeah, you know what? Now you're talking about building a product for that. Like, where is the product that literally fishes its way through the person that you think you're going to hire, goes into LinkedIn and goes to the companies and find, because it was shell companies, it was fake LinkedIn accounts hooked to the shell companies. They call the companies. Of course they work here. Yeah. There's got to be a tool that can weave its way through there to figure out when there's deception in that hiring process somewhere.
Or a real background vendor. Like the background vendors are just absolutely a joke. So like a real background check vendor that does that shit. Yeah.
It's so hard. It's so true. Yeah. And like even that, like that's a perfect statement. Even then you would like screw up sometimes because the level of sophistication, I forget which agency actually did the research here, but they found these shell companies go so deep. They're like methodical where it's like literally layers upon layers. It's like this crazy American patriotic brand name that like has this offshore thing and then it goes to Switzerland. I mean, it's nuts. Yeah. The sophistication. So like the amount of capability technically and philosophically you have to have as that background vendor, Tommy, is like nuts.
Yeah.
But like you're so right. Like that would really, prevent a lot of issues.
Sounds like a little business idea here. Maybe we should start a background check firm.
LFG.
With the tool that you're about to build. I was thinking yesterday when I posted on LinkedIn about the 4th of July, and I was thinking how when I'm young, if my parents are around, I'm safe. Period. That's how I felt. And then as I got a little bit older, I was introduced, first responders and cops, and I'm like, they're going to keep me safe. There's nothing to worry about. If I'm outside, a cop will come and keep me safe.
And then you found the gym. No, I'm kidding.
That too. Well, then I got older and I realized that there's the military, right? And I said, well, they're going to keep us the safest. So I had these layers of safeness. But then I sort of realized yesterday, when you get even older, you realize you're just not safe.
You're on your own.
It's really just about making sure that you're protected, or at least a semblance of protection. Maybe you have a gun. Maybe you have locks on your doors. But for me, this Independence Day, it's about knowing that you're right. You have to go to the gym. You have to put locks on your doors. You have to make sure that this great nation has the best tools, the best AI systems, the best weapons, and all of us here are, we're put to the task there, right? So I'm going to be thinking about this Independence Day, about how there's a lot of people out there keeping me safe and what role that I can play in that, Currently, I'm going to keep my kids safe. I'm going to keep my family safe. I'm curious what you guys are going to be thinking about this 4th of July.
Well, that just sparked something in me, right? Like, this may not be the right answer for anyone, but like, I feel the most safe, like when I'm mentally safe. And what I mean by that is, when I'm watching all the shit, when I'm listening to all the stories, when I'm listening to all the podcasts, all this stuff creeps in my head and my perception of safety is way low. And when I turn it off, my perception of safety is way high. And I'm guilty as anyone is like indulging in the news cycles, but to me it's like that mental safety, and obviously keep my family safe. But that mental safety and the perception of safety is so important, because I think a lot of us have a skewed perception. They either think they're very safe or they think they're not safe at all, and it has to do with kind of like what you're allowing into your brain on a day-to-day basis. And at the end of the day, like, you can protect your family. If something gnarly is going to happen, there's nothing you can do about it, right? But that mental safety is something I cherish. That try, and I strive for it. I'm not always successful, but it's something that's important.
I love that. Viktor Frankl, who wrote A Man's Search for Meaning, he was in concentration camps for years and at the brink of death, and he said to himself, he's like, I can't control anything here. The only thing I can control is how I react to what's going on around me, and to be mentally safe, essentially. And in those crucible moments, it's important to be doing that. So, Rob, going over to you, this 4th of July, Independence Day, I always tell you thanks for serving, and what are you going to be thinking about?
I mean, on this topic, just to keep the safety thing going, like, you know me, like my wife always teases me and compares me to Ben Stiller in Along Came Polly, where like I'm always trying to intercept risk, like the intelligence guy in me, and like just, the system designer / system modeler guy in me. Like, it's true. Like, I guess I feel guilty because it's partly related to my deployments and stuff, but there's always risk to be modeled and intercepted and people to protect. Like, you control everything. Like, you control every bad incident, bad accident. There's always some type of lever you could have interacted with to prevent something bad from happening. So that is always on my shoulders, kind of just like philosophically. But like, going back to what you said, where like you can only realistically control so much, right? Like you only have so many levers in reach, is something I need to remind myself of, and I'm getting better about that. But yeah, I mean, like, just being super grateful for like the level of safety and access I have to opportunities. I couldn't be more grateful, regardless of all the challenges and thrash and conflict we have kind of currently in the US and in the world. It's like there's still so much opportunity. And honestly, one of the ways I want to realize that opportunity is by teaching other people about real practical use cases for artificial intelligence and increasing their knowledge and reducing their risk threshold of wanting to try things. Because to me, it really is that kind of Willy Wonka golden ticket for them. So I'm just grateful for all that stuff this 4th, and I'm going to spend time with the family just barbecuing like a maniac.
Nice. Me too. So I'm going to throw this up here on the way out. Guys, thank you so much for jumping on. This was clearly a lot of fun, and man, I learned something from you guys. And so yesterday I was thinking about what Independence Day was and really, why we're doing what we're doing. And I don't know if everybody remembers some of these things. Is the guys that signed the Declaration of Independence, that was going to get them killed, right? Like, they literally signed that knowing that could have been their death sign. And they said that our rights come from God, not kings and not presidents and not parties. They're unalienable. Every soldier's grave is a receipt. Liberty was paid for in blood. Freedom doesn't protect itself. It demands vigilance and sacrifice. We were just talking about that. And man, I think this is so important. And we're all here. We all have kids. If we don't teach our kids what independence means, somebody else is going to teach them that it absolutely doesn't matter. I just got goosebumps, by the way. And I want to say have a happy 4th of July.
Wow.
And do a lot of grilling. And Pulse Wave. Thanks, guys. Have a great 4th of July. I appreciate it. We'll see you on the next one.
Epic. Thanks for having us.